He only meant to share his supper with a hungry girl, but by sunrise 500 warriors stood guard outside his barn. What ancient code had he unknowingly honored? And why did it make him more protected than anyone in the valley? The wind that morning smelled like wheat and wood smoke. 17-year-old Ellis Cade stood barefoot on the porch, a hunk of bread in one hand and yesterday's dust still crusted on his sleeves. His father had already gone to town, leaving him to patch the chicken coop and mind the cows. It was another silent day in Hollow Rock, until he heard the rustle. It came from the corn rows. Ellis froze. At first he thought it was just a deer, maybe a coyote. But then he saw her, skin dusted with ash, hair tangled with pine needles, crouched low like a shadow trying not to exist. An Indian girl. Her cheeks were sunken, lips cracked, and she looked no older than him, maybe younger. Her eyes were locked on the bread in his hand. Every voice in his head screamed what he'd been taught. Stay away, don't look, don't trust. But there was something in her stare, more hunger than hatred. He didn't say a word. He just broke the loaf in two and set the bigger half on the ground between them, slowly stepping back. The girl didn't move, didn't blink until he nodded once. Then she darted forward like a fox and snatched the bread, retreating into the corn as fast as she'd appeared. Ellis stood alone again, the morning breeze tugging at his shirt. He waited, 5 minutes, 10, but she didn't return. He told no one. That evening he lay in the barn loft, watching the sky bruise from gold to indigo. Crickets sang, an owl called. Somewhere nearby, a coyote yipped once. Ellis thought of the girl, how she ate like she hadn't touched food in days. He wondered where she'd sleep tonight. Then he drifted off. The next morning came like any other, until he opened the barn doors. He blinked, then blinked again. In the field beyond the corral, at least 500 Apache warriors stood in complete silence, lining the fence, mounted and on foot, armed with bows, spears, and rifles. Some wore war paint, others wore only hardened stares. Their horses were still. Not a single voice was raised. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They waited. Ellis stepped outside, heart thudding. His mother screamed from the house. A second later, she appeared in the doorway, rifle shaking hands. But Ellis raised his hand and stepped in front of her. Don't! At the edge of the fence, a tall warrior with bone necklaces and eagle feathers nodded once, then spoke in perfect English. We came for the boy. Ellis swallowed hard. Me? The warrior nodded. You fed the daughter of Mako. His breath caught. Mako. That was the name whispered with fear in every saloon in town. A fallen Apache chief, a killer of scouts, a legend. Ellis's voice barely worked. She didn't tell me that. No, the warrior said, but she told us about you. And as the sun rose higher over the fields of Hollow Rock, Ellis Cade realized the smallest act of kindness had made him part of something far bigger than he could ever imagine. If you thought this moment was intense, you won't want to miss what happens when Ellis is taken from his home. The prairie grass barely moved, the silence held like a loaded musket. Ellis could feel his mother's breath quicken behind him as more Apache riders emerged from the tree line, surrounding the farm in a slow, deliberate circle. They weren't shouting, they weren't charging, they were waiting. The tall warrior stepped forward again, his face unreadable beneath layers of ochre paint and weathered lines. My name is Nantan, war captain of the Red Hills people. Tala is our chief's only daughter. Ellis stared, barely processing. I didn't know. I just gave her some bread. That bread saved her life, Nantan said, and maybe changed more than one. By now the commotion had spread to the main road. Ellis could hear the hoofbeats of galloping horses, shouts from neighbors. The sheriff's voice cut through the air like a whip. Ellis Cade, get back from them now. The townsfolk were assembling. Rifles, pitchforks, prayer books, the usual mix of Hollow Rock justice. The sheriff, Orville Krantz, rode up flanked by 2 deputies and a half-dozen twitchy ranchers. What's the meaning of this? He barked, gun already drawn. Ellis, get over here. Ellis didn't move. They're not attacking, he said, voice even. They just want to talk. The sheriff didn't lower his weapon. You don't talk to people who burn churches, son. That's when the elder Nantan spoke again, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Your boy shared food with the daughter of Mako. Our laws require him to speak to the council. Alone. No harm will come to him. You'll forgive me if I don't take a war chief's word for it, the sheriff spat. One of the townsfolk muttered, It's a trick. They're using him. Another said, Let him take him. He's always been soft. Ellis felt the heat rise in his cheeks but stood his ground. I'm not being forced. I'll go. His mother grabbed his arm. Number, you don't know them. I didn't know her either, he said gently, but she was starving, and she was scared, and I gave her bread. Now I owe it to her to find out why this is happening. Nantan nodded once. You are brave. With nothing but the clothes on his back, Ellis stepped forward. The circle of warriors opened to receive him. As he passed through, the horses didn't move. The men didn't blink. He felt like he was walking into a storm that hadn't yet decided what kind it wanted to be. Behind him, the townsfolk watched in stunned silence as a simple farm boy vanished into the trees alongside 100 silent riders. No one knew where they were going, Ellis included, but deep in his gut, he understood. This wasn't just about one girl or a loaf of bread. Something had been set in motion, and as the last rider disappeared into the woods, Sheriff Krantz muttered to himself, That boy just walked into the fire. He had no idea how right he was. They rode for hours through the thickest parts of the forest, places Ellis had only ever heard about in old trapper stories. Not one of the warriors spoke. Even their horses seemed trained to move in silence. Only the steady drumming of hooves and the occasional whisper of wind through pine boughs kept him company. Ellis sat behind Nantan on a powerful bay stallion. The war chief didn't look back once, but Ellis could feel the weight of his presence, controlled, commanding, and watching everything, always. At last they reached a clearing deep in the hills. Smoke rose in thin ribbons from small fires scattered around low-slung lodges and hides. Women stirred pots. Children played. But as Ellis arrived, everything stopped. Conversations died. Eyes turned. Some are filled with curiosity. Others, contempt. Tala emerged from one of the lodges. Cleaner now, her hair braided and eyes narrowed. She walked slowly toward him, shoulders squared. You came. I said I would, Ellis replied, unsure if that was the right answer. Tala looked him over, then gave a barely perceptible nod. You're braver than most in your town. Before Ellis could respond, a deep voice called out from near the largest fire in the camp. Bring the boy. It was an old man, bent slightly at the waist but wearing a mantle of coyote fur and bones that rustled when he moved. He sat beside a roaring fire, surrounded by other elders, some stoic, some skeptical. Nantan led Ellis to them, then stepped back. The elder's gaze pierced through him. I am Wekapo, speaker of fire, keeper of Mako's memory. You fed his daughter. Ellis nodded, swallowing. She was hungry. I had food. A small thing, Wekapo said, unless it's the right thing at the right time. Another elder leaned in. You know what your people have done. The raids, the land was stolen, our sons were taken. I know, Ellis said, but I'm not them. You wear their skin. You speak their tongue. But I also listened when no one else would, he replied. Silence hung in the air. Then Wekapo chuckled. And you've got fire. The circle of elders exchanged glances. Some nodded. One spat in the fire and looked away. Tala stepped forward. Let me speak for him. There was a long pause before Wekapo gestured for her to continue. Tala faced the elders, her voice clear. He fed me when I could have died. Not because he wanted anything, because it was right. We talk of omens and signs. What greater sign is there than mercy from an enemy? Ellis looked at her, surprised by the passion in her voice. Wekapo studied him for a long time. Then finally, you will stay. You will learn. And we will see if the roots you grow reach deeper than blood. Ellis exhaled slowly. The fire cracked, and the night air wrapped around him like a veil, heavy with smoke and expectation. Back in Hollow Rock, the talk was turning ugly. Ellis Cade had been gone for 3 days. No one had seen him, not since he rode off with the Apache. The town's church bell rang long past Sunday. Sheriff Krantz paced outside the jailhouse, muttering to himself while polishing his revolver like it was the only truth he had left. "Boy's gone native," spat Mr. Lubbock, the blacksmith, as he slammed a horseshoe against his anvil. "If he ain't already scalped, he's probably wearing paint himself." Others nodded. They didn't know Ellis well. He wasn't loud, wasn't a drinker, didn't throw his fists around. Folks didn't trust quiet. And now that silence was being filled with suspicion. By the general store, a group of townsfolk argued in low tones. Preacher Harlan claimed it was a sign of judgment. Widow Keene said she saw smoke in the hills and was sure it meant the Apache were planning something. Children weren't allowed to roam past the well. Farmers kept their rifles leaning by the door. Ellis' mother, Mara Cade, sat alone at their kitchen table. The bread she'd baked had gone cold. She'd worn the same dress for 2 days, refusing to visit the town since the whispers started. When Sheriff Krantz finally knocked on her door, she opened it with tired eyes. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "About my son? About what he's become." Mara's jaw tightened. "He's a good boy." Krantz sighed. "He was. But good boys don't ride off with war parties. He gave a starving girl some bread. That girl is Mako's blood," Krantz said, stepping inside uninvited. "And her people burned half of Fort Wilton last winter. I lost a cousin in that fire." Mara crossed her arms. "What would you have him do? Let her die at our fence line?" "I'd have had him report it. That's what law-abiding folks do." "And what would you have done with her, Orville?" He didn't answer. Down the hill, Ellis' younger brother Sam returned from checking the traps. He entered the house, eyes darting from his mother to the sheriff. "He's still gone?" Mara nodded. Sam looked down at the scuffed floorboards. "I heard someone at school say they're going to put him in jail if he comes back." The sheriff adjusted his hat. "That depends. Depends on whether he brings trouble with him." Mara stepped closer, steel in her voice now. "If anyone's bringing trouble, it's the ones spreading fear before they even hear the truth." Krantz looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he grunted and walked out, the screen door slamming shut behind him. That night, Mara stood at the edge of the porch, eyes scanning the distant hills. She didn't know where her boy was, but she knew him. He wasn't built for hate. He was built for something else, something stronger. The night was moonless. The only light came from the flickering lantern on the Cade porch, still burning, though no one sat beside it. Crickets chirped and frogs croaked from the distant creek, but something else moved in the dark. Something heavier than wind. Ellis was dreaming of fire. In his dream, Tala was screaming, and he was reaching for her, but the ground kept pulling him back. He awoke with a gasp. Sweat clung to his brow, and embers from the council fire crackled beside him. The Apache camp slept in quiet vigilance. No laughter, no music, just the steady rhythm of breath and shadow. Then Nantan appeared beside him, crouched like a ghost. "You must go, now." Ellis sat up. "What's wrong?" "The white men from your town," Nantan said, his voice hushed but hard. "They ride tonight." Ellis froze. "To do what?" Nantan rose to his full height. "They come to spill blood. They fear what they do not understand, and they believe killing will protect them." Ellis's heart pounded. "The farm, my family, they will not see the difference." Without waiting for permission, Ellis ran. 2 warriors on horseback caught up and pulled him onto a mare that moved like wind. Trees blurred as they rode hard toward the Cade homestead. By the time they reached the edge of the field, the barn was already ablaze. A dozen riders, local ranchers and drifters, moved like shadows across the property, their torches held high, rifles slung low. The corn was trampled, the fence smashed. Smoke curled into the sky like a warning. Ellis leapt from the horse and sprinted toward the house. He saw his mother standing on the porch, rifle aimed, a determined fire in her eyes. Sam crouched behind her with a hatchet clutched in trembling hands. Ellis screamed, "It's me!" 2 men turned toward him. One raised a shotgun. Then Tala's arrow split the night. The man dropped with a grunt, the weapon falling uselessly into the dirt. A second rider turned to fire, but was tackled by an Apache scout who emerged from the tree line with the force of a storm. Chaos erupted. Horses reared. Bullets cracked. A torch was hurled and caught the chicken coop. Chickens scattered in a squawking panic. Ellis didn't care. He ran straight to his family. Mara gasped when she saw him. Ellis, your face! He barely registered her touch. Get inside, now! But it was too late. Another rancher took aim, this time at a small Apache boy who had been hiding near the well. Ellis didn't think. He shoved the child aside and took the bullet in his own shoulder. The world spun. Heat, pain, screaming, gunfire, and then silence. When Ellis opened his eyes, he was lying in the grass. The stars above looked unfamiliar. The farm smoldered. Figures moved around him. He couldn't tell if they were friends or enemies. Then Tala appeared, kneeling beside him. "You are a fool," she whispered, "but you are our fool now." Ellis passed out with a bloody smile. Ellis awoke to the scent of crushed sage and fire ash. His shoulder throbbed, bandaged tight with strips of hide and medicinal paste that burned like coals beneath his skin. A low ceiling of stitched hides stretched above him, diffusing morning light into a hazy amber glow. Outside, drums tapped slowly, ritualistically. The hum of voices speaking in Apache rolled like wind through the lodge flaps. He tried to sit up, but winced. "You're alive." Tala's voice came from his left. She sat cross-legged beside him, sleeves rolled, hands stained with blood and ash. Whether it was his or someone else's, he wasn't sure. Her eyes searched his face, not soft, but not angry either. "Barely," Ellis croaked. "You're lucky. The bullet missed your heart by the width of 2 grains. Good aim. Or good foolishness," she muttered, then added more gently, "You saved a child who wasn't yours. That matters here." Ellis turned his head. "And the farm?" "Still standing," she said, "but changed." He closed his eyes, breathing in the ache. "I couldn't let them kill him. He looked like my brother when we were little." Tala was silent for a long moment, then quietly, "That boy was my cousin. His name is Waya. He watched his father hang 2 winters ago. Until last night, he hadn't spoken a word since." Ellis looked at her. "And now? He asked for your name." That hit deeper than the bullet. Outside, Nantan's voice rose in command. The lodge flap lifted, and he entered with Wekapo and 2 other elders. Their eyes settled on Ellis, not as an outsider, but something more complex, something undecided. "You bleed for us," Wekapo said, his voice deep and lined with time. "You risk yourself for one who is not your kin. That is no small act." "I didn't do it for approval," Ellis replied, forcing himself upright. "I did it because it was right." Nantan studied with him. "Then you begin to understand." Ellis blinked. "Understand what?" "That this world doesn't need more sides. It needs more bridges." Wekapo placed a hand on Ellis's good shoulder. "But trust is not given freely. It is built. We would offer you a chance to build it." "How?" "Stay. Learn our ways. Not as a guest." As a student, Ellis glanced at Tala, who said nothing, but her gaze held steady, measuring. "And if I say no, then we return you to your people. But know this, your sheriff has called you a traitor. He's put a price on your name." Ellis looked down at his bandaged arm. "Then I guess I don't have much waiting for me in Hollow Rock." Wekapo nodded. "Then let this place be your fire." That evening, Ellis limped outside. Children watched him. Women whispered. Warriors nodded slightly as he passed. He wasn't one of them. Not yet. But the lines between them and him were starting to blur. He walked to the edge of the forest and looked back toward the smoke trailing from the valley below. His old life was still burning. But here, in the ashes, something else was beginning. They woke him before dawn. Tala entered his lodge and tossed a bundle at his feet. A rawhide canteen, a dried pouch of pemmican, and a curved obsidian knife in a carved sheath. Her expression was unreadable. "Today you stop being a guest." Ellis rubbed his eyes. "So I'm what now? An apprentice?" Tala didn't smile. "You're a question." Before he could reply, Nantan called from outside. In the pale morning light, the Apache gathered around the central fire. Warriors formed a circle, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Wekapo stepped forward, his staff thumping once into the earth. "Ellis Cade," he said in a voice that carried to the trees, "you were born of a world that fears us. Yet you bled for our young and stood between us and vengeance. Still, words are wind. You must face the fire." What fire? Ellis asked, standing tall despite the ache in his wounded shoulder. Wekapo pointed eastward. You will go into the wilderness. No horse, no guide. No weapons but what we gave you. You must return in 4 days, alone, with something to feed the people, and with proof you can endure the land, not just survive it. Ellis's mouth went dry. And if I don't come back? Nantan met his eyes. Then the fire will have spoken. Tala stepped closer and handed him a strip of leather. To bind your wound, she said softly, or your pride. He almost thanked her, but her eyes were guarded. She wasn't helping a friend. She was watching a test. By mid-morning, Ellis was deep into the woods, the camp long behind him. He walked past rocky ledges and through creek beds, heart pounding in his chest louder than the birds above. The forest was thick, ancient, full of things with claws and teeth. Every sound was amplified, the snap of a twig, the distant call of a hawk, his own uncertain footsteps. On the second day, hunger set in. He fashioned a crude snare using tree bark and buried it beneath pine needles. That night, he caught nothing. His stomach gnawed at him like a guilt he couldn't name. By the third day, his wound reopened while climbing a shale ridge. Blood soaked through the leather binding. He pressed snow against it, teeth clenched. He cursed. He prayed. And when that didn't help, he whispered Tala's name just to remember what steadiness sounded like. Then on the fourth morning, he heard it. Gunfire. Distant. Muffled. Not hunting shots. Desperate ones. He followed the sound and crested a ridge. Below, 2 Apache scouts lay pinned behind a boulder, caught in a narrow ravine by 3 men on horseback, white men in oilskin coats, rifles aimed. Ellis didn't think. He crept down the ridge, knife in hand. He used the trees for cover. A shout. A distraction. Then he lunged, catching one rider off guard and dragging him from the saddle. The fight was fast and ugly. Ellis took a rifle butt to the ribs but managed to pull one scout free. The other followed, firing a single shot that scattered the last rider. When it was over, Ellis sat panting in the dirt, chest heaving, blood in his mouth, but alive. So were they. The scouts looked at him with something more than respect, something closer to belonging. When Ellis stumbled back into camp just after sunrise, he looked like something torn out of a war story. His coat was shredded, his lips split, dried blood streaked the side of his neck, and tied to his belt was the rifle he'd taken from the ambush. Behind him, the 2 scouts followed on foot, wounded but walking. One leaned heavily on the other. Word of his return spread fast. By the time Ellis reached the council fire, half the tribe had gathered. Children peeked from behind tents. Warriors stood silent, their expressions unreadable. Wakapo waited near the flames, staff in hand. Tala stood beside him, arms crossed. Ellis dropped the rifle to the dirt. 3 men. I don't know if they were bounty hunters or just drunk with hate, but they were waiting. Your scouts didn't stand a chance. And you? Wekapo asked. Ellis wiped his mouth. I made a choice. The elder nodded. You brought back food for the soul. That is enough. Nantan stepped forward, clasped Ellis's arm, and said to the crowd, the boy came back as a bridge. Murmurs swept through the circle. Approval, caution, but no one spoke against him. Ellis looked for Tala, but she didn't meet his eyes. That night, as the fires burned low and the camp drifted into sleep, Ellis sat alone by the creek, staring at his reflection. He no longer looked like the boy who left Hollow Rock. Something in his eyes had changed, still young, but sharpened, older by miles. Tala approached quietly, dropping beside him without a word. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was water brushing over stones. You didn't have to save them, she finally said. They were yours, Ellis replied. That's reason enough. She nodded slowly. You're changing. So are you, he said. You didn't talk to me for days after I came back. I was watching, she admitted, waiting to see if you'd wear your skin like theirs or like ours. He hesitated. And I think you wear it like someone who's still deciding. Ellis chuckled softly. That sounds about right. Tala shifted, pulling her knees to her chest. Do you want to know why I was alone that day? When did you find me? He turned to her. Only if you want to tell me. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quiet. They took my brother. Not soldiers, settlers. Said he stole a horse. He was 12. They tied him to a tree, burned him in front of the fort. Ellis stared, horrified. I ran. I ran so far I forgot what my own name sounded like. Until you said it. He reached for her hand but stopped just short. Tala looked at him, eyes glassy but steady. You can't undo what your people did, but you didn't turn away from me either. And that matters. They sat in silence, the gap between them smaller than it had ever been. Not friends, not enemies. Something harder to name, but just as real. The storm rolled in just before dusk, not of thunder, but of men. Sheriff Krantz stood at the edge of Hollow Rock with a rifle slung across his chest and 40 men at his back. Farmers, ranchers, drifters with twitchy fingers. They weren't a militia, just angry and scared and looking for someone to blame. A scout had ridden in that morning shouting, "The boy's alive! He's living with them!" That was all it took. A loaf of bread had become a declaration of war. The Apaches are in camp just past the ravine, Krantz growled. This ends tonight. No one argued. No one wanted to be the one to seem soft. Down in the camp, Ellis could feel the pressure building like thunder in his chest. Tala stood beside him, bow in hand, eyes narrowed toward the horizon. The scouts had seen the riders gathering hours ago. They're coming, she said. Ellis swallowed. Then I have to go to them. You do that, she warned. They may shoot before you get 10 steps. I have to try. Minutes later, he rode alone toward Hollow Rock, both hands visible, no weapon in sight. His horse was borrowed, its gait rough, but steady. Dust curled beneath its hooves like ghosts trailing after him. The riders parted slightly as he approached, confused by the sight of a single boy coming down the path like he was unafraid of dying. Krantz stepped forward. Well, look who crawled out from behind a war drum. Ellis didn't flinch. I came to stop a slaughter. You chose your side when you didn't come back. No, Ellis said, voice steady. I chose my side when I didn't let a child die in my front yard. Krantz laughed bitterly. They're savages, son. No, Ellis said louder now. They're people, and some of them trust me now, enough to let me ride out here instead of drawing a line in blood. A few men in the back shuffled their boots. Doubt was a slow but powerful thing. Don't forget, Krantz barked. They burned our trade routes, ambushed our scouts, killed good men. And we stole their land, poisoned their rivers, and strung up their children, Ellis snapped. Which part do you want me to defend? Silence rippled across the gathering like a crack in ice. I'm not asking for friendship, Ellis continued. I'm asking for time. They'll leave peacefully, but if you fire that first shot, you won't be defending Hollow Rock. You'll be writing its eulogy. From the bluff above the valley, Apache warriors had begun to appear, silent, still, arrows nocked, rifles low. They didn't shout. They waited. It was Krantz who blinked first. He lowered his rifle just an inch. You think you can broker peace? I think I already have, Ellis said. Behind him, more townsfolk began to arrive, some with weapons, some without. And in the back of the crowd, his mother stood with Sam beside her, holding no rifle. Just a sign etched in charcoal on a plank of wood. He fed her. We stand with him. Krantz looked around and realized, for the first time, he wasn't holding the town's full weight anymore. They met in the middle, at the edge of the ravine where grass turned to stone and one wrong step could tip a man into darkness. Two lines stood facing each other, Apache on one side, Hollow Rock on the other. No guns were drawn, but every hand twitched near a trigger. Ellis stood between them. Behind him, Nantan, Wekapo, and Tala. In front of him, Sheriff Krantz, flanked by townsfolk who didn't look so sure of their convictions anymore. The sky was a bruised purple. Somewhere, a hawk cried out. This land is your, Krantz began, voice gravelly. But we've got families to protect. How do we know you won't circle back? Wekapo stepped forward. We do not want your town, only your respect. You burn our shelters, we rebuild. You spill our blood, we bury it. But we remember. Nantan added, the boy is not a spy, he is a bridge. Let him stand between us, not above, not beneath, between. Krantz looked at Ellis. You want to be the messenger now? Ellis met his gaze. I want to make sure no child from either side ends up buried for someone else's fear. Then Mara Cade, Ellis's mother, stepped out from the crowd. She held a fresh loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. Her hands trembled as she approached the warriors. Slowly, she unwrapped it and offered it to Tala. No words, just bread. Tala looked at Ellis, then accepted it. It was the same kind her son had shared weeks ago. Simple, coarse, still warm. A symbol too humble to be misunderstood. Wekapo nodded. Then the fire has spoken. That's when Tala turned to the war council and said in a voice that carried across both lines, "We will go, beyond the mountains, where no treaty touches and no road reaches, but we leave with a promise." She looked at Ellis. "He stays, as our voice." Gasps rippled through the townsfolk. "He's no Apache," Krantz snapped. But it was Sam who stepped forward now, Ellis's little brother. "He's not just yours anymore either." Krantz looked at the boy, then at the faces around him. Faces filled not with fire, but quiet hope. His grip on the rifle loosened. Mara turned to her son. "Is this what you want?" Ellis nodded. "It's what I need to do." She didn't argue. She just kissed his forehead like she used to when he was 5, and afraid of the dark. By nightfall, the Apache were gone. No blood spilled, no shots fired, just hoof prints in the soil and bread broken in silence. Ellis remained, no longer belonging fully to Hollow Rock, nor to the tribe, but tethered to both. In the weeks that followed, he helped rewrite a treaty, built a peace post on the ravine, and began sending messages between two worlds that had only ever spoken through violence. And on quiet evenings, when the wind was right, he'd walk to the edge of that ridge and look west, wondering if Tala was out there beneath the same sky, remembering the boy who shared his bread and changed everything.